Yeah, we support the government of South Africa and President Ramaphosa for sending an envoy to Zimbabwe on a mission to see areas that South Africa can assist Zimbabwe. This is according to the words of Comrade Ramaphosa. The relationship between Zimbabwe and South Africa did not start yesterday. It is a very long history that dates back from the days of the liberation struggle. Zimbabwe got its independence first in 1980 and went on to assist South Africa because they got their independence way after Zimbabwe. So there is a relationship which is there. There are bilateral agreements that are signed. So actually the peace of Zimbabwe benefits South Africa more. And South Africa has a mandate to also safeguard and keep its brother, which is Zimbabwe. So the coming in of the envoy is a clear sign that South Africa is concerned about the welfare of Zimbabwe and of Zimbabweans. And it's a clear message that South African government is against what this young activist, this guy who is divorced from truth, Julius Malema, was saying in terms of closing the embassy. Clearly, I don't blame Malema because illiteracy. He is not illiterate. He has some kind of highest rate of illiteracy. So he believes in waffling and stuff. But South African government proved that they are not working hand in hand with Julius Malema.
Yes, but when the envoy came, they did not meet the opposition. In your own opinion, what might be the reasons?
When President Ramaphosa dispatched the envoy, he said the envoy is to meet the government and the relevant stakeholders. So it's then a problem when a certain political party graduates itself into a relevant stakeholder. We need now to know who are the relevant stakeholders, because this is a government-to-government arrangement. These people are not sent here in Zimbabwe because of hashtags. No. But because of a long-standing relationship between South Africa and Zimbabwe. So it's a government-to-government setup. It's worrisome when we have an opposition party like MDC preparing themselves, wearing their suits, preparing tea under the banner of wanting to meet envoy as if it was sent to them. This is an envoy sent with a specific message by the president. And after meeting the government, they will meet relevant stakeholders. And these relevant stakeholders are only known to the envoy and to the government. You cannot then bulldoze here. They can bulldoze themselves into meeting an envoy. Maybe if they follow the route by Xavier Kasukwere and Otam Zembi of going to ANC to meet the SG of ANC, they can do it outside the envoy. So there's nothing, there's no space for opposition in these talks because it's a government-to-government arrangement and the opposition is not in the government. That is democracy. Democracy is about majority rule. Then the majority is that which elects a government. So the government of Zimbabwe was elected by the majority. Whatever is done by the government is in respect to the majority and not the minority. And the interests of the minority are enjoyed from the broader spectrum of the majority. You cannot then enjoy minority rights at the expense of the majority. But you enjoy minority rights within the majority.
Yes, and as a citizen, do you think there is a political crisis in Zimbabwe?
You know, in Zimbabwe, there is no political crisis in the way or in the manner these opposition guys and activists are describing it. The crisis that we have in Zimbabwe is identity crisis. We have in Zimbabwe a political party that wants to monopolize the opposition space. We have an opposition party that feels and thinks it is the only body that qualifies to be an opposition in Zimbabwe. That's why they didn't even join Poland. So the political crisis that we have in Zimbabwe emanates from the fact that we have people with identity crisis, people who align themselves with Americans instead of aligning themselves with Zimbabweans, people who spend much of their time doing global campaigns but forgetting to campaign back home. This then will lead to a loss in elections. Why? Because you must campaign here in Zimbabwe because it's where your votes comes from. But we have a political crisis when we have people who goes outside to campaign against Zimbabwe and expect to be voted locally here in Zimbabwe, not the political crisis that they are defining. And the other crisis that we have in Zimbabwe is of having a political party that doesn't accept election results. It's a crisis. So the crisis that we have now is of people who goes worldwide decampaigning their own country, speaking head of their own country, and this is a crisis. And the crisis, the major crisis, interference by Americans. Right now, if you go to American embassy, they employed lots of blacks, black Americans, blacks from Spain, blacks from France. Why? Because when they do their meetings with these activists and with these MDC politicians, they do not want to be noticed. So if you come across them at a restaurant, you see these are black people having a meeting. But these are the people who are being sent by the American government to release funds, to hand over funds to activists so that they promote their destabilization agenda. So indeed, we have a political crisis of interference by some other nations who are not even capable of containing situations in their backyard. Like America, it has outgrown itself to the extent of not being able to manage its own affairs. So Zimbabwe.
Hashtag Zimbabwe Lives Matter. A lot of people, they are saying there is a lot of human rights abuses in Zimbabwe. What's your comment?
The problem with people is that when they say human rights, they don't really know or understand the meaning of human rights. So if you ask those people, what are human rights? I would encourage you, media personnel, to do a survey, recording people, just ask here in Harare, what are human rights? And you will see and you hear the definitions that will come out of that. That's when you establish that people doesn't even know what human rights are. They think that human rights is whereby you do whatever you deem necessary as an individual. Is where you wake up from your house and start to act in whatever way, and the government and law enforcement agent mustn't ask you. That those are not human rights. Human rights are defined within the four corners of the Constitution. Anything done outside the Constitution, those are not human rights. Why? Because they violate rights of others. Human rights, in their own contextual meaning, if they are exercised, if they are practiced, they don't infringe anybody's rights. So there are no human rights abuse in Zimbabwe. Lockdown is there across the world. People are encouraged to stay indoors. People are encouraged to wear masks so that we contain outbreak of this pandemic. But now, because we have people who does not even have employment history in their entire life, they survive on politics. So this lockdown has minimized their chances of living to the extent that they want to push people to flood the streets. And this is what Americans want. If people flood the streets, videos are shot and pictures are taken, they are sent to United States of America, diplomatic bag is released, they call it a success. Why? Because they do not want peace in Zimbabwe. I suspect Americans are running some projects here in Zimbabwe. Maybe they are siphoning resources of Zimbabwe and they want to divert the attention of government from focusing on investigating whatever they are doing and then look at containing the demonstrations week in and week out. They want to strain the security of this country.
But do you think the ruling party, ZANU-PF, is doing enough to uplift the lives of ordinary people in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, I think ZANU-PF, the fact that they won elections, in fact, they've been winning elections since 1980, it simply means people still have confidence in them. But now, what I see is, in as much as our economy is not performing well, the blame, now people understand that the blame is not to be put on ZANU-PF, because I don't think there's a government that causes unemployment. I don't think there's a government that doesn't want its people to afford bread, to afford butter, to afford basic meals. I don't think there's a government that wants that, because ZANU-PF had a manifesto and they are, in a way, trying to deliver what they promised in a manifesto. The problem now is interference, as I had said when I was defining political crisis in Zimbabwe. Whatever effort that is being done by the government, whatever effort that ZANU-PF is trying to do, it's hitting a brick wall. Why? Because Americans are standing. They are waiting to block each and every way. Why? Because we have people who are benefiting from the crisis that we have in Zimbabwe. We have people that are earning a living out of the crisis. We have the likes of Tendai Bit bragging to say Zimbabwe will never get a pen. Why? Because he's getting everything. We have people, the Nelson Chamisa, saying Zimbabwe mustn't get investors. Why? Because there are certain investors that are investing through them, and they are investing towards promoting destabilization agenda of America here in Zimbabwe. So if our country goes on well, if the economy starts to perform well, these people doesn't have life. So they are making sure things will never be okay. So what the government needs to do now is to be strict on these people and to regard them as murderers. These people should be arrested and convicted because they are causing suffering of lots of people here in Zimbabwe. So the ZANU-PF and the government are trying by all means to do what they see best for upliftment of the people's lives, but they are hitting brick wall because of enemies, and these enemies are working through local cooperators.
And in your own opinion, how is corruption affected the Zimbabwean economy?
Yeah, corruption is affected the Zimbabwean economy. That is a fact. You can't dispute that. Now, you know, corruption starts when we have projects that are established in Zimbabwe, disguising to be people's projects, but with an ulterior motive of fattening pockets of individuals. I'm talking of rampant corruption started around 1999-2000, when Americans launched a project in Zimbabwe they called a people's project, and this was the formation of the MDC. The formation of MDC has nothing to do with people. Now, because they imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe, these illegal sanctions creates a fertile ground for corruption. Why? Because you will be dealing using middlemen, and these middlemen now, you know what they do? Like you want to sell your diamonds, you're using a middleman. The middleman is from Belgium. That person will not buy your diamonds at the exact price or with actual value. You are underpaid. But back home here, you are calculating to say we should get $1 billion from these diamonds. But now, because you are using a middleman, the middleman is paying you 600,000. So suspicions of corruption are all over. But these are caused by the fact that as Zimbabwe, we are surviving under punitive measures. We end up doing some of the shortcuts to make sure Zimbabweans get a living.
There are many Zimbabweans watching right now. What is your message to them?
My message to Zimbabweans is very simple. They should understand what destabilization agenda means. I encourage Zimbabweans to go and read a book by John Perkins called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. How America undermines other governments for their own benefit. This is exactly what is happening in Zimbabwe. So when you are pushing a message on WhatsApp, encouraging demonstrations, encouraging violence, you are actually watering somebody's garden. You are actually feeding somebody's family. It's true that Zimbabwean lives matter, but we should now be able to understand on which Zimbabwean life are we talking about, and how does it matter, and who is not mattering that life. You will see that these foreigners and their projects does not even matter about Zimbabwean's life. We had the diamonds in Chiadzgo. De Beers was there for long. They looted diamonds. The story is not being told. All they are doing is to say Chinese looted diamonds, as if De Beers produced anything. They looted, they went, but because they are good at propaganda, in the absence of truth, a lie becomes truth. Our people are being fed with the truth. Ended up being told that diamonds we could have accumulated something like $15 billion, but because of the government, because of the Chinese, but it's De Beers. So people should know that Americans will never love us. The fact is, the demonstration, the only demonstration that we need to do now is a demonstration against the destabilization agenda by the Americans.
Yes, and lastly, there are some quotas who are saying Mnangagwa's role is worse than that of the former president, Robert Mugabe.
Yeah, I think it depends with the standards they are using to measure performance of Emmerson Mnangagwa. I think Emmerson Mnangagwa is much more different from Robert Mugabe. I think in the previous elections, you saw for the first time Zimbabwe having some 128 political parties. This is only because the president himself is practicing democracy. The political space was opened, elections were free and fair, there was no violence, he was preaching peace, and it's from the MDC guys who were preaching violence. So in terms of measuring, people who say Mugabe's rule was better are the same people who were saying Mugabe is a bad leader. So as long as one is a leader from ZANU-PF, that person will never be good to them. And as long as that person is not approved by Americans, and for Americans to approve a Zimbabwean leader, the person should come in and say, sorry for taking the land is yours, here's the land, take it and go. If in Zimbabwe we are to have a president that will say that, then America will say it's okay. But how can you say take your land when the land is ours? So for the people who are saying Emmerson Mnangagwa is bad, since 1980, ZANU-PF never won with 100% from 1980. This simply means there are people who doesn't want ZANU-PF. From 1980s, there were people who didn't want it. In 1990s, in the 2000s. So to this day, ZANU-PF will never get 100% votes. But the fact and the important fact is of majority. There are people who doesn't love ZANU-PF. Even if MDC collapses today, and I form a political party of my, I give it my own name of my choice, people will follow it. Why? Because they doesn't want ZANU-PF. So the issue of Emmerson Mnangagwa being worse than Mugabe is just being said by people who have an ambition to lead Zimbabwe, and they understand that they will never lead Zimbabwe.
And your last message to the opposition, MDC, would you say it is the American project?
I don't think I have a message to MDC. It will be a sheer waste of time to send a message to, especially to this officeless part of Nelson Chamisa. It's not even relevant to send a message. The message I send to their handlers, to Americans, to say stay away from Zimbabwe. If you want to be friends with Zimbabwe, act in the manner that Russians, Chinese does to Zimbabwe. Win-win. They respect our constitution. They don't come and impose on us democracy according to their definition, because we have democracy according to the definition of our constitution. So to MDC guys, I simply say they need to go back to school. They need maybe to form civic society organization and be part-time activists. If they get an opportunity, they join other political parties. Even if Nelson Chamisa was to follow Brian Mteki, he could be a good follower. Why? Because Brian Mteki is mature. Even if Fadza Emaere is to join Violet Mariacha, it's a very good decision because Ano Guruma, Achina Beri. So I cannot talk about them because they are not politicians. They add nothing to our country. They are of no value.